Welcome to the Insights podcast. Joining me on the show today are two guests, Dr. Alison Maitland and Jenna Ashford. Alison and Jenna are the authors of Drop the Struggle, a transformative approach to achieving your potential in sport and life. I talked to them about combining acceptance and commitment therapy with sports psychology, how to stay motivated in the short and long term, reframing anxious thoughts and feelings, how to feel more confident in your fitness pursuits, how to navigate injury and other setbacks, and much, much more. Before we start, I have a small favour to ask. If you haven't already, please hit the follow button wherever you're tuning into this episode. And then, if you've been listening to the show for a while, I'd really appreciate it if you rated the show too. This will help more listeners discover the podcast and the insights from all of my amazing guests. Thank you. Okay, now for my conversation with Dr. Alison Maitland and Jenna Ashford. Enjoy. Right, welcome Alison and Jenna. Now, this is the first time I'm doing two guests at the same time, for a long time at least anyway, and definitely not in the kind of new format of the podcast. So this will be interesting. I'm sure it'll be absolutely fine. There'll be no technological hiccups, I'm sure. But yeah, welcome both. Sorry. There we go. So first things first, sports psychology. Now, it's a topic that I'm really interested in, and I'm interested in your approach to it as well and your outlook, because you are making this link with sports psychology and ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy. So I suppose a good place to start to maybe kind of frame some of the questions I'm going to throw at you and some of the advice recommendations that you will offer is, could we start with, well, what is ACT? And then why make this link between ACT and sports psychology?
Shall I kick us off, Jenna? So we're nodding at each other here, if that's all right. Yeah, so ACT is something that's not used that much in sports psychology, although it's increasing, but it's been used for about the last 40 plus years in a therapeutic setting. And it's really like a third wave behaviorist approach. If you think the first one was sort of Skinner and Ellis and Beck, and then we've had CBT, which everyone's familiar with, that's what the NHS uses. Then this is sort of the next build on it. And whereas those were about, particularly CBT is about reducing how you feel, what you think, changing what you think. ACT is about changing the relationship with what you think and what you're feeling and allowing those emotions to be there with a view to you doing something different at the end of it. So it's like a build on the other approaches, but it's a radically different way of thinking about stuff. And maybe when we talk, that kind of will become clear. So it uses both acceptance and mindfulness type approaches together with some commitment and behavior change stuff to help us to think and behave more flexibly. That's kind of really what it's about, which if you think about sport is a brilliant thing to be able to do.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I guess in sport, in sort of general psychology, like Alison was saying, but particularly in sport, CBT has been used a lot. This idea that if you're having a certain negative thought, actually let's try and reshape that or sort of reframe it or try and think something a little bit different, try and think a bit positively. And I think that we think that works to some extent and can work for some people in some contexts, but it doesn't work all of the time. And actually, there can be a lot of the time when our minds are very negative or they are self-critical. You do have all these anxious thoughts that pop up, and that is just the way the mind works. And I think Alison and I were working together and working a lot in sport, and we could see that there was just something that wasn't absolutely hitting the mark with everyone. And Alison sort of describes it as a sticking plaster. And I think that was the sense that we get. And this isn't to put down CBT. And if you've had CBT and it's working for you, then absolutely that's great. But this is just a different approach that actually says it doesn't matter what you think. It's about changing that relationship with your thoughts. So it's okay if you're incredibly anxious before a sporting event. In fact, we would sort of say that was pretty normal. And that is just generally the way that our minds work. Actually, let's not try and get rid of that. Let's not try and change it. Let's just change the way that we view that. And actually, maybe we could take away the sort of negative banner that might gain, and view it differently. And just that changing the relationship with the thought then changes everything. And Alison and I both sort of, for ourselves and in the clients that we work with, have seen just how ACT can really be transformational.
I'm sure listeners can relate to the going over thoughts in our head and being very anxious and nervous, maybe not even just in the sporting context, but other contexts. And I think it's really interesting that, we don't want to just put a plaster over it. And I suppose how many athletes, but also just people in the general public, are just, okay, yeah, how can I escape that, block that thought, ignore it, change it? And so it's really interesting that you're taking this other approach, right? We accept that thought and learn from it. And that's something that I'm hearing more about. Seeing stress, seeing anxiety is not a bad thing, in quotation marks. And maybe even looking at stress as a good thing. Like if I'm getting stressed about a competition, or if I'm getting stressed about a presentation, delivering some training at school, something like that, then is that actually showing that I'm ready and I'm prepared and it's something that's worthwhile doing? So of course I'm going to be, my heart's going to be racing a little bit faster, and of course I'm going to be, the adrenaline's going to be pumping.
Yeah, exactly.
You raise a great point, because it depends whether, and that's the nub of ACT, it's whether the stress is stopping you from doing the things that are important to you. Whether you're then not sleeping or you're over preparing for the presentation, or whether actually you can, in our words, kind of drop the struggle with them, accept it's going to be a bit uncomfortable because it's important, and go and do it anyway. So yeah, that's a great example.
I like that. It's gonna be a struggle, but do it anyway. So, most people listening are probably not pro athletes. Maybe no one listening is a professional athlete, but who knows? I don't know. So when I think of those people listening, and myself as well, aren't professional athletes, but are just looking to stay fit, stay healthy, maybe enter the odd race, maybe the odd competition to kind of, I love competing with people. I love racing against people. But always from that kind of that amateur standpoint. But still interested in what I can learn from sports psychology. What can I apply to that race, to that competition, but also to wider life as well. Can the amateur athlete like myself, can they learn from your recommendations and from your approach, and can they take the ideas from your book, Drop the Struggle, which you mentioned, Drop the Struggle, a transformative approach to achieving your potential in sport and life? Are there lessons in there for everyone?
Yes, there are. I'm smiling at Jenna there. In fact, when we wrote the book, we went, let's make sure that this would translate. If we put ourselves in the shoes of someone just starting out, or someone who just does it for fun, does this work? And, if you're the Olympic athlete who's struggling, does this work too? So it works across, because at the end of the day, this is about a process that all human beings go through, whether they're athletes, their mums, their children, they're 90-year-olds, they're in business, it doesn't matter, they're dancers, whatever environment they're in, ACT works for everybody. What would you say, Jenna?
Yeah, I'd say exactly the same. I think, but you take a thing like sport, and we're choosing to sort of deliberately put ourselves into an environment where there's going to be competition, there's going to be pressure, we might fail, we might mess up, we might lose, we might get injured, we might not get selected. All of these things play into it, and inevitably that brings up a load of different emotions that sometimes, on a good day, we're probably fine with handling. And then sometimes they really we do struggle with them. And then, away from sport, let's think about normal life. And you've got, interviews, you've got stuff at work, projects, deadlines, you've got your children, you've got relationships, and trying to deal with other people and all of these different contexts. So without trying to make the book for everyone in every situation, I think there's just some fundamental aspects, like Alison says, that kind of the way that our minds work. And this book is just trying to go, it doesn't matter what sport you play, to what level you play that sport, and also in your broader life, take these principles and apply them.
Yeah, an important reminder that these professional athletes, they're not superhumans, they are normal people as well, even though they're doing some pretty superhuman stuff, aren't they? And there's some pretty impressive athletes out there. But yeah, it's an important reminder that we're all wired the same, and these principles can be applied across the board. Interesting. So
for sure, it's a good point, because I think it is really easy, isn't it, to look at the best or to look at elite and think they don't feel the same things I feel. And it's just not true. You know, Alison and I work with, whether you're the CEO of a company or an Olympic athlete, guarantee you still feel the same things. It's just that you learn to deal with it differently. So
maybe that's what makes it more kind of jarring and makes people really take notice when an athlete comes out and says that they're struggling with their mental health. You know, we've seen more high profile cases recently, haven't we? Simone Biles that was talking about this, and other athletes as well, that they get down and they get depressed and they get really anxious and worried, and they've really, maybe even more so, I don't know, you know, that the type of person that can be a professional athlete is probably also the type of person that is very focused, very thinks about things in such detail that of course they might show that in other ways, and it could have a negative impact as well.
Well, I mean, the more successful you are at your sport, the more important it becomes. The more important it becomes, the more challenging the thoughts and feelings can go with that. So, yeah.
Right. Can we start with some lessons then? And can we go to motivation first? I guess I'm interested in kind of two parts of motivation, the short term and the long term. And, you know, that's not a scientific maybe term from me, but just from my approach as an amateur, you know, I think of it as in the short term and the long term. For example, in the short term, if we started there, I'm thinking about those evenings where I'm just not feeling motivated to go and do a workout, or it's a cold, wet evening and I really don't want to go for a run and I'd rather just sit on the sofa watching Netflix or something. So what can I do there? What recommendations might you offer if, you know, motivation is a bit low in the short term?
Yeah, so I think we've all experienced this at various points. Coming out of the winter as well, if you're doing a sport that's outdoors, it's tough. And I think the first thing is just to recognise that those sort of evenings, those feelings will crop up. Again, even the best of the best aren't motivated 100% of the time. So, you know, as the name goes, that acceptance piece I think is really important. Don't beat yourself up for having that thought or feeling. I think as soon as you do that, it then becomes this big thing where, I know I've really I should be this and I should be that. And actually, if we can just have a little bit of self-compassion, a little bit of acceptance in there, it's okay. Okay, so that's sort of a first thing. And then there's a few techniques we talk about in the book, but one of them is sort of called urge surfing. So in urge surfing, the idea is if you imagine like a wave, the kind of urges that we have are a bit like that. They sort of come, they reach a crescendo, and then they kind of fade away. And if you almost think about it in reverse for the sort of urges that you're talking about, is I don't want to go and do something. Almost just sort of imagine like that being a wave, really sort of, I really struggle, I don't want to do this, it kind of reach the point, and then know that it will pass, and know that whether it's today, whether it's for one night only, whether it's for a week or whatever it is, know that it will pass, and almost sort of appreciate that, recognize that. I think it goes side by side with that acceptance piece. And then the kind of, I think we will like tangible actions, don't we? The sort of in the really short term, thinking about what's the smallest action that I can do to take a step forward towards this thing that I really don't want to do. I think in our heads we often think, well, if I'm not going to do the whole session, then I won't do it at all. And actually, in ACT we talk a lot about committed action, just taking a step forward, just taking an action in the right direction, in the direction of the person that you want to be right now. And if that means just putting on your shoes and starting, then that's something. And oftentimes what you'll find is once you start a behavior, you then, you find the motivation to want to continue doing it. So starting as small as you can. One example that I like to use is nothing to do with sport, but if you ever go to the dentist and they tell you to floss your teeth, I don't know about you, every time I go, they always tell me to floss my teeth. And I heard one time that someone said they just started with flossing one tooth. And if you sort of think about that, you kind of think, well, that's a bit pointless. But the point is they started the habit of flossing. And so it took, 5 seconds, even less than that, to floss once they started the habit. And, after a while, that becomes then, okay, I'm someone who flosses my teeth. And then while I'm here, I might as well do a few more teeth. And then before I know it, I'm flossing the whole mouth. So if you sort of take that in as a sort of micro example, if you just start the behavior, what you tend to find then is actually it's something that will continue, that motivation, that sort of desire that you've got in you will start to spark. So start the behavior, start small, appreciate and accept that you will have dips in motivation.
It sounds very James Clear-esque. I think he gives the example in his book Atomic Habits of the guy that wanted to start going to the gym, and the way he started, I think for a long time, I don't know if it was up to a year or something, all he did was drive to the gym, wait outside, and then just go home, and just got into the habit of driving into the car park and not actually ever going into the gym until he just formed that habit and then started going in for longer sessions. But I love all that because it's something that I have put out there and I've shared because I've heard it from different people. I've heard it from psychologists. I've also heard it from more of the kind of the bro science podcast world as well, about, discipline over motivation and just get moving, and mood follows action, all these kind of terms that I've really identified with and thought, yeah, that makes sense. And I feel like that's how I've approached it as well, that I've just, even if I haven't felt motivated, I've kind of thought, okay, well, can I just get moving and see what happens? So it's just so good to hear it from two psychologists as well that are talking about this, that actually, this is what can really work, that we just get moving. I do it when I'm cooking as well. Like sometimes I really don't feel like cooking in the evening, but I know I should. So all I do is when I get home from school, I'll put out all the ingredients and I won't start. I'll just put them out and put the chopping board out. And so they're just there and I'll walk away. And it's like just overcoming that bit of a barrier then just gets you started. It's interesting, isn't it, how our brain works? We just need to kind of overcome a little bit of a barrier and we're away.
Yeah. For sure. And I think this links with your second point of longer term motivation. But oftentimes when we work with people, we'll start with what's most important to you? What do you want to stand for as a person, as an athlete? What are your values, if you like? And once you've worked with someone to establish those, you can then, this kind of behavior that you're trying to motivate yourself to do becomes a bit easier because it's really clear. I know I'm the type of person that wants to work hard even when it's raining outside, or I know I'm the type of person that, in your example, wants to eat healthily. And then you can kind of go back and think, okay, so I've got two choices now. I'm on the sofa. I've got the choice. I could stay here or I could get up, which is the harder path to choose. But if you've done the work to think, yeah, I know the type of person I want to be, when you're making those decisions, you then, the type of behavior that would take you away from being the person you want to be is to stay on that sofa. The type of behavior that would take you towards being the person you want to be is to get up off that sofa and start the session. So I think, again, values is a really integral part to a lot of our work in ACT, but in particular motivation.
I'm hearing more about this, kind of starting with that endpoint and then working your way backwards in so many different areas of life. You project ahead a year from now, 5 years from now, and then work your way back. Okay, what steps do I need to put into place? So can we talk a bit more about that, the long term then? How do I increase my long-term motivation? And you've said, right, well, can we envision the person that you want to be? But what kind of concrete steps could I take other than just sitting here and imagining it? Are there questions I can ask myself? Are there, I don't know, is there a checkbox exercise that I can do? I don't know, what can I do there?
I'll let Alison come in a second, but I think just on something you said there is, so goals is one thing and values is another. And I think both are really important. Goals are something, like you say, you sort of set yourself 1 year's time, 5 years' time, and you put steps in place to work towards them. Values are slightly different in that you never sort of achieve a value. It's something that you're continually, day in, day out, in your behaviors and your choices, living. You're choosing to live that, by that value. So yeah, just to sort of, I guess, throw that into the mix. But in terms of the kind of what we can do, I think it's like anything. It's taking that time to reflect on, the goals on the one side and the values on the other. What is it that I want to achieve? How might I look to get that? Breaking that down. I think sometimes we think about the big goal. We don't necessarily then take the time to really break that down. The big goal is the kind of motivation piece, isn't it? That's the bit we kind of are aspiring to achieve. But then the really smaller goals help us day to day to know, okay, today this is on my plan. I'm on the sofa. This is, so that's the kind of breaking it down that really helps. And then on the values side of things, again, not something we're looking to achieve, but something in our day-to-day behavior that we're, using to guide our decisions, is just thinking about what is important to me. Who is the person that I want to be? What do I want to be known for? We sometimes get people to think about their retirement party, if you like, and there's a few people that stand up and make a speech about you. What do you want people to say? Not about the things you've achieved, but about the person that you've been, how you've impacted them, how you've conducted yourself, the impression that you've had, the influence that you've had, so that kind of thing. So yeah, just having a bit of time to reflect on that, I think then really helps. Alison, I don't know if there's anything else you'd add to that.
I think the only thing I'd add was quite often it's our internal stuff that gets in the way then of us achieving our goals. So we've got our values to follow, like that compass. We know where we want to get to in terms of the plan. That's our goals. But sometimes either our thoughts, that inner critic, whatever you want to call it, goes, oh no, you couldn't do that. Why are you doing that? Oh no, so that stops you. You get hooked by that and you struggle with that. Or you just don't want to experience the uncomfortableness, because quite often when we go out and do our sport, like you said, it's raining. If I was going out tonight playing netball on a court, I'm going to get wet and probably blown away. Yes, can I make space for some of the uncomfortableness of doing some of this? And also, can I just stay in the moment and just play my sport right here, right now? So we would also explore with an athlete, what else is going on inside that's stopping you, or might stop you, or could stop you from achieving those goals. You need to work with all of those parts of it to actually take those steps forwards and get there.
Interesting. And so with that inner self-critic, is that about acceptance again? Is that just listening to that voice and going, okay, yeah, like I've entertained you for a little bit, now that you're telling me I can't do it. Okay, but actually I know that I can, and I'm going to take a different direction, rather than, like we were saying earlier, not blocking it out and not beating ourselves up because we're talking to ourselves in that way. Is that a good way to look at it?
Yeah, I guess so. I guess we would say just to drop the struggle with those thoughts, to fight them, to prove whether they're right or wrong, to just go, oh, okay, they're thoughts. And when you come down to it, thoughts are just a jumble of sound. Sometimes Jenna and I do an exercise called lemon, lemon, lemon. If you were to say lemon, 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 what have I ended up with? Just a jumble of sounds. And yet we could sit here right now, and whoever's listening could listen and go, I could imagine a lemon. What does a lemon look like, Sam? Tell me what a lemon looks like.
Yellow oval.
Yellow oval. What's the skin like?
Kind of dimply and waxy.
Dimply, waxy and dimply, yeah. And what does it smell like?
Like a lemon, citrusy.
Yeah, citrusy and lemony, yeah. And have you ever tasted a lemon, bitten into a lemon?
I like it. Yeah.
You like it? Okay, some people don't. But it's got a particular taste, hasn't it? So right here, right now, we can imagine a lemon, but there is no lemon here, is there?
No.
And so that's what we're trying to do, is help people to understand that although it feels like there's a lemon right here, right now, like that feeling feels like and that thought feels like it's here right now. Actually, it's like lemon, 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 lemon. It's just a jumble of sounds. So yes, we often will do with athletes some things that help them to just drop the struggle with it, to, like you did it beautifully. Yeah. Oh, here's that thought again. Okay. Thanks, mind, for giving me that thought. Yeah. Okay. But I'm off now to do my training. See you. Bye. Kind of thing. Yeah.
Almost like a Buddhist approach or something. I remember going to a mindfulness teacher, and he was talking about our thoughts and how you can open the door and you can say hello, but you're not inviting them in for tea. That's the way he put it.
I love that. That's a great way of saying it. Yeah.
There's lots of great metaphors in ACT. Another one for this is if you imagine like a tug of war, and tug of war with your thoughts, and that's what often we get into, isn't it? We sort of try and, whether we pull or push or whatever it is, sort of get fight with them, and we sometimes forget that you can actually just drop the rope, and like they're still there, they're still like at the end of the rope, but we're just not struggling with them, and that's the sort of image I suppose we're trying to get to.
And I'm definitely not going to forget the lemon now. Every time a thought pops into my head that I don't like, it's going to be lemon. Okay. So we spent a good amount of time on motivation. Love it. Can we move on to anxiety? Now, I get nervous every time I go to a start line, a half marathon or a high rocks race or some other competition. I will be feeling anxious. And then there'll even be like the physical manifestations of that. I can get a bit shaky. People around me might be noticing that I'm a bit more on edge. And first of all, I think to myself, why are you getting so nervous, Sam? Like your reputation doesn't depend on this race. I'm not doing it for money. I'm not doing it for worldwide acclaim or anything. No one's going to see me if I don't finish the race or I fail or whatever. But I'm still getting really nervous. So I guess I'm interested to hear from you. Why would I be getting so anxious? And also, how can I reduce that? But I suppose I only want to reduce it so much, don't I? Because I don't want to feel completely calm and sedated before I do a competition where I want to perform really well. So I know that's a couple of questions there, but I'm interested to hear your thoughts.
Maybe let me do the first bit of that and then I'll hand on to Jenna. But let me say right up front is, with ACT, that's one of the differences of the approach. It's one of the reasons why Jenna and I love it with working with athletes, is ACT says you're not trying, your goal is never to try and reduce the feeling, the emotion, whatever it is, whether it's a great feeling of elation or whether it's a feeling of real anxiety. It's about making space for it and still taking the action. I think you said that kind of said that earlier. The mood follows the action. The feelings will come and go, kind of thing. So, but we'll come back to that. So in simplest terms, two of the reasons why we feel the anxiety, and you've already said it, is because it's important to us. If you were walking around the corner, you wouldn't feel anxious, pretty sure, unless you live somewhere that's really violent or something. But, normally we don't feel anxious on those things that are not that important to us. There's no kind of outcome that bothers us. So that's one reason why we have a set of feelings that go with it. But the other one is we often tell ourselves a set of stories around how we should be. And so one of them is, sometimes we have a story that we say to ourselves that, well, that's just how people like me are, or people from my family are, or I'm programmed to be anxious.
I can identify with that.
So that's okay, great. So that's one of them. And like Jenna said, we could argue all day about whether that's true or not true. What's more important is it helpful or not to get caught up in that feeling? Or is that just another lemon kind of thing? Another one is that the feeling can be quite intense, and it feels to us sometimes like we can be overwhelmed by it, particularly with things like anxiety. But actually, when we say to athletes, where is that anxiety? So if we said to you, where's the anxiety that you feel? Could you tell me where you feel it in your body?
I think I'd normally say in the stomach, quite high in the stomach, I think,
Yeah, so you know where it is, but it's not all of you, and it's not bigger than you. So that's the second thing, is we think it's so intense, but actually there's more of you. And we use a lovely metaphor in ACT called the sky and the weather. And we say that you, as the athlete, are like the sky. And just like the sky, you've always got room for the weather. And the thoughts and the feelings are like the weather, they come and go. But the sky's always got room for the weather, no matter how bad they get. So it's remembering that actually you've got the feelings, but they're not bigger than you. And then also sometimes we've been taught that feeling anxious is a weakness. So there's something there about, who we think we are. Whereas actually, we just said it's quite normal. If you go back to cave person days, we were taught we need to feel anxious sometimes, because otherwise then we'd have got eaten by the hairy mammoth, or we'd have been thrown out of the group. The two things that we feared most back then. We still have that natural instinctual response. So it's quite normal to feel anxious. So, and then the last one is that we think that to be good at a sport, we also have to feel good. And that's not true. Back to, as Jenna said, whatever athletes we work with, they all have feelings they like and feelings they don't like. They feel anxious, they don't feel anxious. Again, it's quite a normal part of doing something that's important to you. So that's kind of a framing sometimes to go, they're all stories I'm telling myself. And actually, I don't need to get hooked by all of those. I can just notice them. I can lemon them. I can, Jenna, I don't know if you want to talk about any ways of working with anxiety.
I think you've summarised that brilliantly. I think, it's so easy, isn't it, to try and most of the clients that come to us will say, I want to get rid of X, Y, or Z. And that's our first starting point is, look, that's not the aim here. Hopefully it's an outcome that will happen by nature of dropping the struggle, but it's certainly not what we're aiming for. And I think, again, that just, there's fundamental things here which are quite difficult to get your head around, because it makes sense, doesn't it? But to really sort of buy into that, as sports people, we're so used to doing stuff. We've got a goal and I want to work hard towards the goal. And this is almost the opposite. We're saying, why don't we just let go of it? Why don't we just accept it? Why don't we just make space for it? And so it's a very different mentality, but just totally transforms that anxiety once you can get your head around that.
One of my favourite ways of talking with athletes about it is to talk about it a bit like a wrinkly sock. If you've ever tried to run around and your socks wrinkled down into your shoe, your welly boots, often happens in welly boots, doesn't it? It's a bit like that. It's really annoying and you don't want to have it. But actually that's what acceptance is. It's about going, it's not a distraction. It's not getting rid of it. It's making space for the fact that you've got that slightly uncomfortable feeling, but you can still walk around with your welly boots on. Might not want it, might not like it, but you can do it. And sometimes with athletes, we do, like a wall sit. You ever done that? Like, you're standing against the wall and you've got your legs parallel and your shins vertical. And I get them to do that with a mindset of saying no to the feelings, because your thighs start to burn after quite a short period of time. And it's like, and you get them to go say no to it. I don't want you. I don't want those feelings. You get them to use their body to be closed and everything like this. And you notice when they do it, particularly if you've got a group of people, how suddenly the room goes quite quiet and they don't say a lot and their heads are down and so on. And then you get them to repeat their wall sit and you say, okay, this time I want you to say yes to all the feelings and emotions that come up for you. And they could be the burning in the legs, but they could also be, I feel really stupid, or I'm not sure how long I can do this for. But you get them to do it in an expansive, open way. Lift their heads up, lift their bodies up. Say yes to it. Okay, you're welcome here, whatever the feeling is. And it's amazing how suddenly the volume in the room goes up. They talk to each other. There's even some laughter, even though they're doing a wall sit. So that's another way of just kind of practically, physically getting the difference between making space for the anxiety and going, okay, I don't want you. I don't really like you. I don't want this feeling in my stomach. But actually, it's okay for you to be here because this is important to me. So yeah, that's just another way of kind of working with that.
It's all just gold. I'm loving this. It's so I think important, everything you're saying, and it's so impactful. And I'm just thinking of all the ways that we can apply this, not just to sporting life, but to our wider life as well. I will move on, even though I could just carry on talking about anxiety. And when you talked about kind of the family stuff and stories we tell ourselves, I was almost going to go down another road, but maybe I'll save that for another time. I do think it's interesting how athletes we might see as quite robotic and, you know, as we said before, just kind of very focused and one-dimensional. Actually, of course, we've all got that stuff going on, haven't we? We've all got the family history and the stories we were told as we were growing up. And maybe we hopefully more now athletes are unpicking that, and maybe we weren't expecting, maybe, I don't know, a professional athlete wouldn't expect to have to unpick what their 7-year-old self was telling them or being told when they were 7, and actually it all comes into, full circle, doesn't it? But like I said, I will move on, because I've realised that we're coming up to half an hour already. It just seems to be flying past. And maybe we can go to something that is kind of linked to anxiety, and that's confidence. A question that I get sent quite often can be from women asking me about being more confident in the gym or joining a running club. And of course, I can offer my unique perspective, but I don't feel qualified at all to talk to a woman who wants to feel more confident in the gym or wants to start exercising. So I love an opportunity like this where I can ask people that this is your field. How can that person feel more confident? How can they get started when they've got certain goals? Maybe they are feeling a bit, and of course it's understandable, feeling a bit intimidated going into a new environment. Perhaps they're not, that they don't feel that they're fit enough to start, and I've got to get to a certain point of fitness before I can get started. Well, of course, if you wait until you're fit enough, then you're never going to get started, are you? So we've just got to get started. So what kind of tips could you offer there for increasing confidence?
Shall I kick us off?
Yeah, go on, Alison.
So I think you said it already again. We definitely come from the point you said mood follows action. And I think that's also what we say. We say, actually, you start off with confidence with an action, and then the feeling may or may not follow. It probably will do, but it might not do, actually. You might never feel confident, but you can take a confident action. So we'd always start with that. And I think the question I would always ask, a woman, a young girl in that situation was, if you had unlimited confidence, what would you be going to do in the gym? What would I see you doing? What behaviors, what actions would you be doing? Because that gets you to the starting point of not trying to control your feelings. And so if I said to you right now, Sam, could you just numb your leg? So right where you are now, just take your left leg and numb it for me. Completely numb it.
I can't do it.
So that if I could come down there with a chainsaw, I would, I could cut it off and you wouldn't feel it.
No, I can't.
Can you do that?
No.
You can't. No. So, and we think that we get to control our feelings. So we think that we could control our confidence and make ourselves more confident. Jenna and I would both say, yeah, it's feeling confidence. So we don't get to control the feeling, but we do get to control the action. So tell us, if you had a magic wand and you had this amazing confidence, what would you be doing? And then we would work with, okay, so what can we do to get you doing those things? So whether it is just stepping into the gym, whether it is lifting some weights, whether it's doing a simple exercise class, whether it's doing half an exercise class, whatever it is that you want to be doing, okay, what can we be doing to do those things? Jenna, what would you add?
Yeah, I think that, fundamentally, I think it's, you ask people, can you control your thoughts? And most people say, yeah, to some extent. And, unless you're a monk in Tibet, and even though, that the control of the thoughts and feelings, I think is, the first thing that's got to be really important. And therefore, what can we control? Because we've got to have, an element of doing something, and that's where the behavior comes in. So I think that's a really important one. Look, we've spoken about a lot of different skills, I suppose, with regards to ACT, but something that our mind is very good at is worrying about the future. What might people think? What might happen if I do that? Who might be there? X, Y, and Z. And it's also very, very good at worrying about the past. Well, last time I went, this happened, or, replaying something over and over again from a past experience. And what we're not so good at is staying in this present moment. So that's something else to think about when you're thinking about confidence, is recognizing and just being aware that your mind is doing that, is jumping to the future, jumping to the past. Again, we're never trying to push away, it's accepting it, but it's just recognizing that actually, let me try and bring myself to the here and now. And there's lots of techniques that you can use to do that. Breathing is a really nice one. for taking a few deep breaths to bring yourself back to the here and now. We call it anchors. So anything that's kind of physical that you can do. If you think of a ship at sea is being blown around in a storm, often when we're dealing with, like going back to anxiety, or we're dealing with feelings or thoughts around lack of confidence, they're kind of getting blown around in this storm, and the ship would drop the anchor to steady itself. And that's the kind of metaphor we use. What anchor can we drop just to bring ourselves to the here and now? And that's, the breath is something that's here and now. There's loads of different things that you can do if you're, at a table and you've got a drink, taking a sip of your drink. You can do that on the side of the sports pitch. If there's a racket in your hand or something, you can grip that or flick that, or it doesn't really matter what the thing is, as long as you've got something to bring you back to the here and now. And in that process, you can kind of say to yourself, right, I recognize my mind is wandering, and that is okay. That's what it's built to do. But I want to be in the here and now and think about the action that I want to take right now. So again, that might be something that's just helpful for that.
It's just so invaluable, these tips, because some of us are just kind of going with the flow, aren't we? We're just being pulled away. Our thoughts are just dragging us from here, there, and everywhere. And then when you hear this, okay, well, what if you had unlimited confidence? And okay, what you can do this short little technique to bring yourself to the present moment. And it's like that, it can just make such a difference, can't it? Just those very simple questions, very simple techniques can make all the difference. And so I'm so grateful when people like you come on to the show and share these ideas, because I've had one or two people message me saying, I have started in the gym now, I've started lifting weights. And so if I can keep putting information out there that maybe just more people are getting into the gym and lifting weights and feeling stronger and feeling more confident, and these just little steps are just invaluable. So I really appreciate those.
They're easy to say,
get that
and they're harder to do. And I think the thing that amazes me about Alison and I about psychology is people really expect to train physically. Right? That if you want to get strong, you have to lift weights. And it's exactly the same with your mind. If you want to get better at this stuff, you have to practice it. So, after listening to this, it would just be what's your one thing or two things that you want to go away and practice and actually practice it, and then you really will notice.
Okay, you heard it, listeners. We're all three of us are waiting to hear from you. You can message us, email us if you want to know what you've put in place. That's a good point, very good point. Finally, can I ask you about setbacks? If I talk from tell a bit of a personal story, that when I was 21, just after I'd graduated, I'd been training for the decathlon. I took a bit of a break from the decathlon, did a couple of other things, did a bit of rugby and other bits of other sports. And then for some reason thought it'd be a good idea to enter another athletic competition. So I was doing the 110 meter hurdles, got to about the third hurdle, and my Achilles ruptured, a full rupture when I got to about the third hurdle. So I went from training 5, 6, 7 times a week to, of course, going through the recovery process that is involved with rupturing Achilles, which I'm sure is a very long process. So I spent a long time on the sofa and then rehab, etc. And I look back and think, what if I'd have known what I know now, or at least was taking an interest in psychology and self-talk and perspective? How different might it have been for me? Because it was a very low point for sure. I, as I said, went from being very active to just being sat on the sofa. And anyone that goes through that, it's going to be a difficult time, isn't it? And I very much experienced that difficult time. So if I'd have known about these approaches back then, if I'd have known a bit more about sports psychology and ACT, how could I have navigated that period of my life? And so, of course, what I mean by this as well is other people that are experiencing maybe a major injury, but of course other setbacks as well that they might be going through. What lessons can we take? How can we navigate through a period like that?
I think the first thing to say is that is tough, and it will always be tough experiencing setbacks. And, no amount of magic, psychology, wand waving is going to make that brilliant. So that's where the acceptance comes in again. Accepting the situation, accepting how you're feeling about the situation. Really hard to do, but focusing on that acceptance piece. There's a great metaphor that Alison and I love. Again, let's come back to the metaphors. You'll notice there's a lot of those in ACT. We actually have a business called Yellowtail, and it came about through this story of a moth, a yellowtail moth. And a lady was out walking one day, and she was interested in nature, and she found this moth that was almost like stuck in its cocoon. It was sort of halfway through, and she could see it's really struggling to get through this like tiny gap in the cocoon. And she was sort of watching it for a bit, and then she thought, I need to help here. I need to do something because this is too painful to watch. And so she just pulled it through and sort of, got it out of its cocoon. And she was kind of watching it, waiting, because the moth turns into the butterfly and, brilliantly flies away. And that's kind of what she was expecting. And all she saw was this flailing moth sort of with these kind of swollen wings, and it didn't look right at all. And what she didn't realize was that a moth has to fit through this tiny hole in its cocoon in order to, push the blood or whatever it is out into the right places so that it can come out as a butterfly. It has to go through that really difficult struggle in order to get to the other side. And I think it's just a nice metaphor, isn't it? People say, oh, you can learn from every setback, and you genuinely can, but you also kind of have to have them to become the person that you're going to become. And it's difficult to appreciate that when you're in the moment. But the more that you can remember that there will be value on the other side of this, if I can find some meaning and value right here, right now, then that's brilliant. But recognizing and having the patience and acceptance that will come at the end. Alison, I don't know if there's anything else on that. I'll set back to you on that. That's sort of the predominant story, I think.
Yeah, I think I would add, quite often when, particularly if it's an injury setback, we struggle with the notion of who am I? Now I'm not in the team, I'm not with the other, people I train with or I play with or that kind of thing. So sometimes we do an exercise which is helping us to realize that, we're not the content of what we think about ourselves. So there's a lovely exercise in the book actually called I am not. And it just helps us to realize, because we often think with this kind of narrow set of stuff, and it helps us to realize that we're all sorts of capabilities. We're more than just the little story we're telling about ourselves that we're an athlete, or we're disciplined in our training, or we're courageous, or we're a terrible player, or all those sorts of things. And so it's a really lovely way of going, we are those things and we're many more things. And it helps you to realize also that quite often when you're injured, you're playing through all of those characteristics, but doing them in comparison to somebody else. So when you're injured, you're not fit, but you often compare yourself to other people. Oh, I'm not as fit, I'm fitter than I am. So again, it helps you just think through all of those times when you've gone, I'm myself, but only myself in comparison to somebody else. Oh, is that really true? No, I'm actually just myself, kind of thing. And I'm not just these 5 characteristics, 3 of which I like and 1 of which I don't like, but I'm more than all of that. And actually, if I took away the labels that I've given myself, that I'm a decathlete, or I'm a fit person, or I'm strong, or I'm resilient, or I'm whatever. If I take all those away, what am I left with? And if you actually write that out, you go, I am resilient, you take resilient away, you're just left with I am. You're just yourself. So sometimes that's an exercise that athletes need to go through to go, okay, I'm more than just an athlete. I'm myself as a son. I'm myself as someone who works hard at, studying. You've got all those parts of yourself. So that's often the thing that we'll work with too, to realize you're more than the labels that you kind of stick on yourself. It's another ACT concept. It's kind of hidden a little bit in ACT, but is a very important part of
Which
it.
is difficult, isn't it, when so much is attached to status and, like you said, our identity, these stories we tell ourselves. I did a Hyrox competition a few weeks ago, and I did a really slow time. And I was annoyed with myself, but I think part of it was a bit of embarrassment. I was like, oh, but I'm sharing on social media how hard I've trained, and then I've got there and I've done a time that's even slower than my last time. So how embarrassing is that? And then you have to catch yourself and go, how ridiculous is that? How ridiculous that I'm worried about what people think, when actually, you know, all the messages that you get are admiring and encouraging and everything, and like, don't worry, you'll get back on track. So I think that's a really important point, of course, to let go of these stories we tell ourselves about being this athlete, or I don't know, whatever role it is. And like you said, we're enough as we are, aren't we? Like, you are enough just as you are, and that's okay. That's okay. And then going back to sorry, go on, Jenna.
And it's sorry. I was just going to say, it's when you said there, you've got to catch yourself. And that's like, I think, a really important part, because can we stop ourselves comparing? No. Can we stop ourselves thinking that was rubbish, you should have done better? No. But can we watch those thoughts, like just notice those thoughts and let them go? Yes, we can. And so again, like, it's not about, okay, I've got to stop comparing now. It's about just noticing when you are doing that and letting it go. And, you know, you say to yourself, that's ridiculous. You know, almost sort of laughing at how ridiculous your mind can be is a really nice way of doing that.
And then going back to what you said, Jenna, about like seeing the positives and going through the struggle and coming out the other side, and what we learn from that. I mean, for sure, I'm a different person because of what I went through. And after that, I then, because I'd spent so long on the sofa, I then went and did Camp America. And then I realized that I really enjoyed working with children. And then I became a primary school teacher. So all of these things happen, don't they? And my mum would always say, you know, things happen for a reason. And I can remember seeing in the last couple of years how that has been labeled toxic positivity, that we shouldn't say things like that things happen for a reason, or, you know, something good will come of this, and that's toxic. I wonder what you think of that. Like, is it toxic to say those statements? Because on the one hand, I can understand that you don't want to just dismiss someone's feelings and what they're going through, like, oh, it'll be fine, you'll get over it. But at the same time, I think there's some truth in, you're going to go through a really difficult time, but let's see what door this opens once you get through it.
And I think Jenna and I, coming from an ACT perspective, would say, as she did right then, actually just acknowledge that's a rubbish situation. So just acknowledge for a moment and have some self-compassion and just go, this is really tough, which isn't positivity at all. It's accepting the reality of the situation. But it's then, as she said, not getting caught up in the thoughts and feelings that go with it, making space for the fact that you're sad or you're angry or whatever goes with that setback or that injury. And then coming back to, talked earlier about values, going, okay, what if I, you know, sitting right here, right now, injured with my Achilles ruptured, what would be one step towards being the person I want to be right now? So that could be doing my rehab, could be wearing my boot, could be reaching out to somebody. You know, how do my values give me a compass for the next step? Just the one step that I need to take. And I think that's what opens the doors to you learning from the situation then, because you've taken a step out of it. So I think we probably sit in the middle somewhere. I don't know if you'd agree with me, Jenna, that we would acknowledge, yeah, this is pretty rubbish. And your feelings are okay to have the feelings of sadness, anger, embarrassment, you know, whatever they are. That's okay. But don't let them dictate that next step that you take towards the person you want to be, how you want to live your life going forwards from this place right now, because we can only be in the present.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's that acknowledgement of how rubbish the situation is and how rubbish it makes you feel that's probably different to the toxic positivity, which is just thrust upon you. You need to be thinking or feeling this, or, you know, you shouldn't make space for those uncomfortable thoughts and feelings, because I think we would say you absolutely do.
Right. Thank you so much to both of you, Alison and Jenna. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I've been kind of leaning forward and listening intently, because these are topics that I'm really interested in. I think the way that you've explained the different approaches and the metaphors that we've covered, the numerous metaphors, have all been really useful. So I really want to thank you for your time this evening.
Oh, you're very welcome.
I do finish with some quick fire questions, and I guess I'll have to be even quicker fire if we're with two guests. But it would be great if both of you could answer each of the questions. The first one is, what's one lesson you wish you'd have been taught when you were a child?
Shall I go first?
Go on.
Okay. Mine was longer ago than yours was. So mine would have been to live my values. I wish I'd known how to drop the struggle and live my values. So I was an athlete and I didn't perform to my very best as a young person. But if I'd realised that I could have looked at the struggles I had and the doubts I had with it, and gone, oh yeah, but one of my values is excitement. How could I see excitement in all the places I went to and the different people I met and all of those sorts of things, or the freedom? I love running. What? Why didn't I? So that would have been one thing I wish someone had taught me, which hopefully I've passed on to my children. Who knows? They'll tell you whether that was the case.
And I would say, for me, it's that you don't have to believe all of your thoughts. So I think it's really tempting to just think your mind is, gospel, and whatever your mind is telling you is the truth. And actually, a lot of what our mind tells us is a load of rubbish. So actually, just like that, letting almost like weight off your shoulder and just being like, I can choose. I can actually have a choice here if I buy into that or not. I think there's something hugely powerful in that.
Next question. What's one habit you've perhaps introduced into your life recently that's making a difference, that's perhaps helping you feel happier and healthier?
I would say time to do nothing. Quite difficult with jobs, with kids, etc. But time to do nothing. And by nothing, I honestly mean nothing. So allowing your mind just to wander, and wherever it goes, wherever it goes. It's so rare we get that opportunity, even if it's just a minute in your day. Time to do nothing, I would say.
Mine is more about noticing and naming how I feel. It feels a bit embarrassing to say that because I'm 61, so I should have worked this out by now, and I've been working as a psychologist for a long, long time. But it's taken me a long time to really, in the ebb and flow of a day, to go, oh, okay, gee, I'm noticing I'm feeling a bit anxious about this conversation, or, oh yeah, I'm noticing there's just some feeling kind of, what's that? Yeah, so that's a habit I'm really trying to develop now, just to notice. I don't have to do anything about it, but it just stops me from getting caught up in it or avoiding things, or I call them the cappuccino moments, going to make myself a cup of tea kind of thing to avoid it. But if I can notice it and go, okay, it's just that, right, get on with it. So yeah, that's my one.
Such a good one.
And the last one is, if you could give everyone in the world one book, which book would you give them?
Go on, Alison.
My turn first. So I would give them Jonathan Livingston Seagull. Don't know if either of you have ever read that one. If you haven't read that, oh, you have to read it.
Brilliant.
It's an amazing book. He says in it, he's about this seagull. And he says, more than anything, Jonathan Livingston Seagull loved to fly. And I thought, oh, wow, that tells me about his purpose. But there's stuff in the book about learning and about freedom and about forgiveness and failure. And I thought, why did I love it? Because somebody bought it for me when I was 16, a friend of mine, and it's been on my shelf ever since. And I've recommended it to people, Jenna, haven't I?
You have. I have read it off your recommendation. When
I think about my values, it speaks to some of my core values are spirituality, freedom, excitement, and courage. And it's about that. It's something you can probably see in my face. And I picked it off the shelf when I knew you were going to ask me that question. And I thought, yeah, it sets me alive when I read that book. So yeah, that's one I would recommend.
And for me, I'd say other than our book, of course, I was going to go with Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now. I think, books come to you at the times when you need them most, don't they? But for me, that was an incredibly powerful book, I suppose, linked to the point I just said about doing nothing. But that acceptance, that being in the moment, I think if anyone struggles with that, that's got to be a book top of your list to explore some of his thoughts around it.
Really interesting, because those two books, one I've never heard of, which one I'm going to go and see if they've got it at the library now, or perhaps get it from Amazon. And then Eckhart Tolle, the Power of Now. I'm looking at it, like I'm facing it right now. And I first got given it about 7 years ago, and I put it down because I think I just wasn't ready for the ideas in it, and so I've put it down, didn't finish it. And I keep telling myself, you need to pick this back up, because I think I'm more ready now to dive into it and understand the ideas in it a bit better. So you've given me a bit of motivation, Jenna, and maybe I'll pick it up again.
There you go.
And
I've never read it.
Oh, there you go. We can both get it done. You mentioned your book, so let's talk about, well, where can people get their hands on your book, Drop the Struggle?
It's easy to get hold of if you just Google Drop the Struggle. It has I have it here, a lovely yellow cover. You can get it from Amazon. You can get it from all good bookstores like Blackwell's or Waterstones. And you can also get it from our publisher.
Excellent. And people that might want to connect with you, are you on social media? Can they find you there? And if so, please share handles.
I never know this off by So we do have a website called Yellowtail Sports Psychology. So you can certainly Google that, and you find Jenna and I and our kind of contact details. I think I'm Maitland Alison on LinkedIn. That's the main place where you would find me. There is Maitland, so don't get us mixed up. Just something similar, but anyway.
I'm not huge on social media either, but Jenna Ashford, at Jenna Ashford is you'll find me somewhere.
Well, I'm jealous. I wish I was on social media less. I think you're doing the right thing by not spending too much time on there. Comes with the job, but anyway.
That's a whole nother podcast on that as well.
Right. Thank you again. Really appreciate both of you for taking the time on your Thursday evening to come and chat to me. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.
I've enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in. I hope you found the conversation insightful. If you did enjoy the episode, please share it with friends, family, and colleagues who you think would find it helpful too. You can also support the podcast by following and rating the show on whichever app you're listening on. Thanks again, and I look forward to bringing you another episode soon.